You know, as an accountant, I've spent my entire adult life believing that every debt eventually comes due. I live in a world of balance sheets, ledgers, and absolute truths. If the numbers don't add up, there's a reason, a hidden cost, a leak in the system. For 17 years, I thought my marriage was my most stable asset. I thought I had built a fortress in Columbus, Ohio, a beautiful home, a firm that was finally turning a real profit, and two children, Shane and Haley, who were the absolute heartbeat of my existence. I thought Nadine loved me. I thought the life we shared was the reward for every 70-hour work week I pulled during tax season. I thought wrong. It was a Tuesday, just a regular, unremarkable Tuesday in late March. I came home around 8 p.m., my brain fried from staring at spreadsheets and tax codes. My shoulders were in knots. My eyes were stinging from the blue light of my monitors, and all I wanted was the warmth of my home. I walked into the kitchen and saw Nadine standing at the counter, her back to me, wrapped in that floral silk robe I'd bought her for our 15th anniversary. The house was quiet. Shane was upstairs, likely buried in his history homework. Haley had already turned in. It felt like the perfect moment to just connect. I walked up behind her, moved by a sudden wave of affection, and reached out to wrap my arms around her waist. It wasn't a sexual thing. It was just a husband wanting to hold his wife after a long battle with the world. But the moment my hands touched her shoulders, she didn't lean back. She didn't sigh with relief. She recoiled. She literally jerked away from me like I was a leper. She stepped 3 feet back, clutching her robe closed, her face contorting into a mask of pure, unadulterated disgust. "What do you think you're doing?" Her voice wasn't just cold, it was sub-zero. I stood there, my arms still hanging in the empty air, feeling the blood rush to my face. I was trying to hug my wife. "Nadine, is that a crime now?" She turned fully toward me, and what I saw in her eyes haunted me. It wasn't anger I could handle. This was contempt, the kind of look you give a stray dog that just tracked mud onto an expensive rug. "You think you've earned that?" she asked. Her voice was a low hiss. "You come home smelling like coffee and stress, barely grunting 2 words to me because you're so buried in your precious numbers. And you think you can just walk in and take what you want? You haven't earned a second of my affection, Dean. Not tonight. Maybe not ever again." I felt like she'd reached into my chest and squeezed my heart until it stopped. 17 years, 2 children, a lifetime of I-dos, and she looked at me like I was a stranger, asking for spare change in a dark alley. "Nadine, where's this coming from? What's going on?" "Nothing's going on with me." "Dean," she said, her voice turning eerily calm as she picked up her tea. "Maybe something's finally going right." "Don't touch me again." She walked past me, the scent of her expensive perfume lingering like a funeral shroud. I stood in that kitchen for 20 minutes, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, staring at the spot where she had just vivisected my dignity. My mind started racing, trying to find the error in the ledger. When did I become the villain? When did she start hating me? I didn't sleep. I sat in my home office, staring at our wedding photo, the one taken on the beach in Maui. We looked so young, so certain. By 4 a.m., the accountant in me took over. The system was broken. The asset was compromised. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I quietly packed a single leather duffel bag with the essentials. I walked into the kitchen, took a notepad, and wrote 4 words in my best, most clinical handwriting. "Earn my return." I left it on the counter next to her coffee maker. I walked out the front door before the sun could witness my shame, and I drove. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay in a house where the air was thick with my wife's contempt. I just smiled to myself in the dark of the car. She wanted to play games with earning things? Fine. Let's see what her life looks like when the man who pays for every single brick of that house stops showing up. She had no idea what was coming. I drove for 3 hours straight, heading east, away from the life I'd known. The sun began to crawl over the horizon as I hit Zanesville, painting the Ohio highway in a cruel, beautiful orange. Any other day, I would have appreciated the view. Today, it just felt like the world was mocking me. I found a motel outside of Cambridge. It was the kind of place where the sign has 3 letters burned out, and the continental breakfast is a bowl of bruised apples and a pot of coffee that tastes like charcoal. It was perfect. I checked in under my own name. I wasn't hiding from the law, just from the lie my life had become. The room smelled of stale cigarettes and a desperate attempt at pine-scented floor cleaner. I sat on the edge of the bed, the springs groaning under my weight, and I just existed. No spreadsheets, no client calls, just the silence of a man who had been told he was worthless by the only person whose opinion mattered. My mind, trained for forensic precision, began to audit the last 12 months. I started looking for the anomalies. The late nights Nadine claimed she was spending with her sister, Denise. The sudden increase in corporate seminars for her boutique marketing firm, the way she had started sleeping with her phone tucked under her pillow, like it was a holy relic. Around noon, I finally turned my phone back on. It exploded. 14 missed calls. 8 from Nadine, 4 from Shane, 2 from my brother, Stuart. I felt a pang of guilt seeing Shane's name, but I couldn't face him yet. Not until I knew what I was dealing with. I logged into our family phone plan, a small perk of being the guy who manages the finances. I pulled up the call logs for Nadine's line. My stomach did a slow, nauseating roll. There was a number. It appeared every single night after 10 p.m., always when I was at the office late or when I was traveling for a client audit. The calls weren't quick check-ins. They were marathons, 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours at 1 a.m. while I was sleeping 3 inches away from her. The number was local, a 614 area code. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. This wasn't a rough patch. This wasn't her being unhappy with my work schedule. This was a coordinated long-term deception. Whoever this person was, they knew my life better than I did. They knew exactly when the coast was clear. I wrote the number down on a motel notepad. I stared at it for an hour, my thumb hovering over the dial button. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to hear the voice of the man who had turned my wife's heart to stone. But I stopped myself. I'm an accountant. You don't confront the fraudster until you've gathered all the evidence. I called my brother, Stuart, instead. Dean, where the hell are you, man? Stuart's voice was frantic. Nadine is a wreck. She called me crying, saying you just vanished. Shane is pacing the house like a caged animal. I'm safe. Stu, I said, my voice sounding hollow, even to me. I can't be there right now. She flinched. Stu. She flinched like I was trash when I tried to hug her. There was a long silence on the other end. Stuart is a good man, but he's never been good at lying. I heard him take a shaky breath. Dean, look, I wasn't going to say anything. I figured I was just being paranoid. Or maybe it was just business. But about a month ago, I was at that Italian place on 5th Street. You know, the one with the patio. I saw Nadine. She was in a booth in the back with a guy, tall, mid-40s, graying at the temples. He looked like he walked off the cover of a yachting magazine. They weren't looking at menus, Dean. They were looking at each other. My heart didn't just break. It shattered into a million jagged pieces. Did you see his face? I did. Polished. Rich. He had that old money vibe. They left in a silver Lexus. I thanked him and hung up. I sat in that dim motel room, the neon light from the sign outside flickering against the peeling wallpaper. My wife wasn't just cold. She was living a double life. And the worst part? She had the audacity to tell me that I hadn't earned her hug. I looked at the phone number on the notepad again. Tomorrow, the audit would begin in earnest. Tonight, I would let the rage turn into a plan. I wouldn't say a word to her. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of my pain. I would let her dig her own grave, and I would make sure the walls were too steep for her to ever climb out. The next morning, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a predator. I drove back toward Columbus, but I didn't go home. I didn't even go to my office. Instead, I drove to a nondescript brick building near the airport. It was tucked between a wholesale tire shop and a plumbing supply warehouse. Vince DeLuca's office was exactly what you'd expect from a man who spent his life looking through keyholes. It smelled of stale coffee and old paper. Vince was a former CPD detective with eyes that looked like they'd seen every sin in the city twice. Accountants and PIs have a lot in common, Vince said, leaning back in his creaky leather chair after I explained the situation. We both follow the money, and the money always tells the truth. I handed him the phone number and the photo of Nadine. I need to know who he is. I need to know how long, and I need to know if she's spent a dime of our money on him. Vince studied the photo of Nadine. Pretty woman. They usually are. Give me a week, Mr. Pritchard. I'll give you his shoe size and his dental records. While Vince started digging, I checked into a different motel, this one in Dublin. I couldn't stay away from my kids forever. I was dying inside, thinking about Shane and Haley. I sent Shane a text. I'm safe. I'm in town. I love you more than life itself. I'll explain everything soon. Just stay strong for your sister. He replied almost instantly, Dad, please come home. Mom is acting weird. She's on the phone constantly, crying, then yelling. What did she do? She's acting weird because her ATM just walked out. I thought bitterly. That evening, I met my friend Terrence at a dive bar. Terrence has been my best friend since we were fraternity brothers at Ohio State. He's the only person who knows where all my bodies are buried, metaphorically speaking. You look like you've been through a meat grinder, Terrence said, sliding a Guinness toward me. I told him everything. The kitchen, the flinch, the phone logs, Stuart's sighting. Terrence's expression went from sympathetic to dark. He set his glass down with a heavy thud. Dean, I have to tell you something. I was at that children's hospital gala 2 months ago, the one you missed because the Patterson account was blowing up. Yeah, I remember. Nadine said she went with Denise. She didn't, Terrence said, looking me dead in the eye. She was there with a guy, polished, silver Lexus keys on the table. She introduced him as a colleague of Denise's. I didn't think much of it at the time, but the way he touched her, he put his hand on the small of her back when they walked to the bar. It was possessive. Dean, it wasn't a colleague touch. Did you hear a name? Terrence frowned. Douglas. I'm pretty sure she called him Douglas. Douglas. The ghost finally had a name. I drove back to my motel, the name Douglas echoing in my head like a death knell. This wasn't a fling. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a long-term, calculated betrayal. While I was sitting in my office at 11 p.m. on a Friday night making sure my clients' futures were secure, my wife was at galas and high-end Italian restaurants with Douglas. She had constructed a perfect alibi using her sister. Choosing events where she knew I wouldn't be, she had turned my hard work into her freedom to cheat. I sat on the motel bed and opened my laptop. I didn't go to social media. I went to the bank. I'm an accountant. I know where the bodies are buried in a bank statement. I started pulling records from the last 24 months. At first glance, everything looked normal. Mortgage payments, groceries, utilities. But then I saw the transfers, small amounts, $400 here, $600 there, always to a third-party payment app. Over 2 years, it added up to nearly $30,000. And then I found the big one. My heart stopped. The air in the motel room felt like it had been sucked out by a vacuum. A second mortgage, $180,000, taken out 8 months ago. The signature on the digital document was mine, or a damn good imitation of it. But I hadn't signed a second mortgage. I hadn't even discussed it. Nadine hadn't just cheated on me. She had committed felony fraud. She was draining the equity of our home while sleeping with a man named Douglas. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just leaned back and stared at the ceiling. You haven't earned this hug, she had said. I just smiled. A cold, calculated smile. You want to talk about earning things? Nadine, you're about to earn a prison cell. Vince DeLuca called me 4 days later. His voice was a flat, professional drone, but I could hear the pity vibrating underneath it. I've got him, Dean, and believe me, you're going to want to be sitting down for this. I sat. Tell me, the number belongs to a prepaid burner, but the billing address for the refill cards was tied to a corporate account. His name is Douglas Kemp. 46 years old. He's a senior partner at Kemp and Harrington, one of the biggest corporate law firms in the city. He specializes in mergers and acquisitions. Divorced twice. No kids. Net worth somewhere north of $4 million. I felt a surge of nausea. A millionaire lawyer. My wife had traded a hard-working accountant for a man who made more in a month than I made in a year. There's more, Vince continued. Kemp is a shark. He has a reputation in the legal community. He likes married women. Specifically, he likes the ones whose husbands are distracted by work. He's a professional homewrecker, Dean. 3 years ago, he was a co-respondent in a messy divorce case for a local CEO's wife. He knows exactly how to play the game. And Nadine? I've got the photos. Dean. I followed them yesterday. They met at the Marriott near the airport at 2 p.m. They stayed for 3 hours. I've got shots of them entering together, laughing, and kissing in the parking lot before they left. I've already sent them to your email. I clicked the link. The images were high resolution. There was my wife, the woman who had recoiled at my touch, throwing her arms around Douglas Kemp's neck. She was radiant. She was smiling a smile I hadn't seen directed at me since the Obama administration. Dean? I also looked into the education funds like you asked, Vince said, his voice dropping an octave. You might want to brace yourself. I logged into the 529 plans I'd set up for Shane and Haley. I'd been contributing faithfully for 16 years. There should have been nearly $100,000 in there. Shane's balance, $12. 44. Haley's balance, $37. 12. The money was gone. She had liquidated our children's futures. I felt a cold, sharp rage settle into my bones. It wasn't the hot rage of a man who wants to punch a wall. It was the focused, surgical rage of an auditor who has found the embezzlement. She wasn't just building a freedom fund. She was strip mining my life. But I needed to know the depth of the rot. I drove to the east side of Columbus, to an apartment complex I knew well. I didn't call. I just knocked. Denise, Nadine's sister, opened the door. She looked like she'd been crying. When she saw me, her face went white. Dean, Nadine said you were having a breakdown. I'm not having a breakdown. Denise, I said, stepping past her into the apartment. I'm having a revelation. I know about Douglas Kemp. I know about the Marriott. I know about the $180,000 second mortgage. Denise sank onto her sofa, her hands trembling. She didn't even try to deny it. How long have you been the alibi? She wouldn't look at me. I told her it was wrong. I told her you were a good man, Dean. I swear. How long? I roared. 10 years, she whispered. The room started to spin. 10 years, a decade. More than half of our marriage had been a lie. 10 years? I gasped. Shane was 6. Haley was an infant. You mean to tell me she's been seeing this man for 10 years? On and off at first. Denise sobbed. Then it became constant. She said Douglas made her feel alive. She said you were just boring, that you were obsessed with your firm. I stood there, staring at the family photos on Denise's mantle. Photos of us at Thanksgiving. Photos of us at Shane's graduation from middle school. All of them were staged. All of them were performances. There's one more thing. Dean, Denise said, her voice barely audible. Something she told me when she was drunk at my 30th birthday party. She made me swear I'd never tell. She said there was some overlap. When she first met Douglas, I felt the air leave my lungs. Overlap? What are you saying? She said Shane might not be yours. She never got a test. She said she didn't want to know because you were doing such a good job raising him. I didn't say a word. I didn't scream. I just turned around and walked out. I got into my car and sat there in the silence of the parking lot. My son, my boy, the one I'd taught to throw a baseball, the one I'd stayed up with during every fever, the one who had my father's middle name. He might not be mine. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They were steady. I was no longer a husband. I was a man who had been hollowed out by a decade of deceit. I pulled out my phone and searched for a mobile DNA testing clinic. I had 48 hours to find out if my entire reality was a fiction, and God help Nadine when I found out the truth. The diner was a greasy spoon near Shane's high school. I sat in a back booth, nursing a glass of water, watching the door. When Shane walked in, my heart ached. He looked so much like me, or so I'd always told myself. He had the same broad shoulders, the same focused expression. "Dad," he said, sliding into the booth. He looked exhausted. "Mom is losing her mind. She's telling everyone you've had a mental break. She's already talking to a lawyer about protecting the assets. What's going on?" I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the boy who used to cry when he fell off his bike. I saw the young man who was planning to study engineering. "Shane, I need you to listen to me," I said, my voice thick. "Your mother and I, we are finished. She's been very dishonest for a very long time. About money and about other things. Is it true? Is there someone else?" "Yes," I said. "A man named Douglas Kemp. For 10 years, Shane." Shane's face went through a cycle of shock, then a simmering, dark anger. 10 years? That's my whole life, Dad." "I know, son, I know. We talked for an hour. I didn't tell him about the paternity doubt. I couldn't, not until I knew, but when he got up to go to the bathroom, I did what I had to do. I took the soda cup he'd been drinking from, the straw still wet with his saliva, and I slipped it into a Ziploc bag. I felt like a criminal. I felt like I was betraying him. But I had to know if the foundation I'd built my life on was made of sand. 2 days later, I was sitting in a sterile waiting room in a medical building downtown. The air smelled of rubbing alcohol and industrial carpet. A woman in scrubs walked out holding a white envelope. "Mr. Pritchard." I stood up. My legs felt like they were made of lead. I took the envelope and walked to a quiet corner of the hallway. I tore it open. Probability of paternity, 0%. The words were cold, binary, absolute. The alleged father is excluded as the biological father of the tested child. I leaned against the wall, the paper fluttering in my hand. 0. Not a low percentage, not a possibility of error. 0. For 16 years, I had poured every ounce of my love, my money, and my soul into a child who belonged to the man my wife was sleeping with. I had worked 70-hour weeks to pay for the braces, the summer camps, and the college fund of Douglas Kemp's son. While I was coaching Shane's Little League games, Douglas was likely in my bed, while I was saving every penny for Shane's future. Nadine was laughing with his real father about what a good job the boring accountant was doing. I don't remember the walk to my car. I don't remember the drive back to my motel. The next thing I knew, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, the sun setting outside, clutching that piece of paper like it was a suicide note. I thought about the night in the kitchen. "You think you earned that?" She knew. Every time she looked at me, she knew I was a cuckold. She knew I was a servant in my own house, raising another man's heir while she drained my bank accounts. I picked up my phone. I didn't call Nadine. I called my lawyer, a man named Marcus Thorne, who specialized in scorched earth divorces. "Marcus," I said, my voice sounding like it was coming from a deep, dark well. "I have the DNA results. It's a 0. I have the mortgage fraud. I have the 10-year timeline. I want her to lose everything. I want her to lose the house, the car, and the dignity she thinks she still has. I want Douglas Kemp's firm to know exactly what kind of partner they're harboring. Can we do that?" "Dean," Marcus said, his voice dropping into a predatory purr. "In the state of Ohio, with this much evidence of financial waste and fraud, I'm going to make sure she's paying you by the time we're done. What's the first move?" "She wants me to go to marriage counseling tomorrow," I said. "She set it up with a friend of hers, a doctor, Vivian Crane. She thinks she's setting a trap to prove I'm unstable." "Go," Marcus said. "Go to the session. But Dean, record everything. Let her talk. Let her lie. Give her enough rope to hang herself." I hung up and looked at the wedding photo one last time. I took it out of the frame, walked over to the motel trash can, and ripped it into 100 tiny pieces. The audit was over. Now, it was time for the liquidation. Doctor. Vivian Crane's office was located in a trendy, high-ceilinged building in the short North District. It was filled with mid-century modern furniture, expensive-looking abstract art, and the faint scent of lavender meant to soothe the broken souls who entered. Nadine was already there when I walked in. She was dressed in a conservative navy suit, looking every bit the victimized, worried wife. She had a tissue clutched in her hand. "Dean," she whispered, as I sat down in the leather armchair across from her. "Thank you for coming. I've been so worried about your mental health." I didn't say a word. I just sat there, my phone in my jacket pocket with the recording app running. I looked at Dr. Crane. She was a woman in her 50s, with glasses on a chain and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Dean, I'm Dr. Crane," she said, her voice dripping with practiced empathy. "Nadine has told me a little bit about the crisis you're experiencing. She's very concerned about your sudden departure and these accusations you've been making. She feels you might be suffering from a stress-induced paranoid episode." I leaned back and crossed my legs. A paranoid episode. Is that the professional diagnosis, doctor? Or just what Nadine told you over brunch last Sunday? "Doctor," Crane's smile flickered. "I don't follow. I'm a neutral party here." "Are you?" I asked. "'Cause I did a little digging of my own. You and Nadine went to the same college. You're on the board of the same charity. In fact, you were both tagged in a photo at a fundraiser 2 months ago. The one for the Children's Hospital. You were standing right next to her, and a man named Douglas Kemp." The room went deathly silent. Nadine's grip on the tissue tightened until her knuckles were white. "This isn't a therapy session, is it?" I continued, my voice calm, almost bored. "This is an ambush. You were going to document my delusions so Nadine could use them in a custody hearing. You were going to help her steal my children and the rest of my assets." "Dean, you're being irrational," Nadine shrieked, her mask of the grieving wife finally slipping. "This is exactly what I was talking about. You're obsessed with these lies." "Lies?" I pulled a manila folder from my briefcase and tossed it onto the glass coffee table. "In that folder, you'll find the high-res photos of you and Douglas Kemp at the Marriott. You'll find the bank records showing the $180,000 second mortgage you forged my name on. You'll find the logs showing you emptied the kids' college funds to pay for your freedom fund." Nadine stared at the folder like it was a live bomb. "And at the very back," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, "is a DNA report. Probability of paternity for Shane, 0%. Nadine's breath hitched. She looked like she was about to faint. "Doctor," Crane stood up, looking terrified. I think I should leave you two to talk," the therapist stammered. "Sit down, Vivian," I said. And for the first time, I let the steel in my voice show. "You're a witness now, and since I'm recording this entire conversation, you might want to be very careful about what you say next." Nadine looked at me, her eyes filled with a desperate, animalistic fear. "Dean, please, it wasn't. I was unhappy. You were always working. I was working for his son." "Nadine!" I finally erupted, the rage breaking through the surface. "I was working 70 hours a week so you could play house with a millionaire lawyer and tell me I didn't earn a hug in my own kitchen. You stole my life. You stole my son's future." "Shane loves you," she sobbed. "Shane loves a lie you created." I stood up, looming over her. "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow. I'm reporting the mortgage fraud to the police. And Marcus Thorne, you remember him, right? He's the guy who won the record settlement against your boyfriend's firm last year. He's my lawyer. By the time he's done, you won't have enough money to buy a cup of coffee, let alone a silver Lexus." I walked out of that office, leaving Nadine collapsed in the chair, wailing. I didn't feel bad for her. I didn't feel a single spark of regret. I felt like I had just finished the most difficult audit of my life. And finally, the books were balanced. She had no idea what was coming next. The legal battle was just the beginning. I was going to ensure that Douglas Kemp and Nadine were famous in Columbus for all the wrong reasons. 3 days after the blowout in the short north, I was sitting in my motel room when there was a knock at the door. I checked the peephole. It was Shane. His eyes were bloodshot, and he was holding a stack of papers. I opened the door and he practically fell into the room. "Is it true?" he choked out. "I found the emails, Dad, on Mom's old laptop. She left it open. She was talking to that lawyer, Douglas. She told him I was better off not knowing he was my real father. She told him you were doing the hard work for them." I felt a fresh wave of agony. I reached out and pulled him into a hug. This time, there was no recoil. He clung to me like a drowning man to a life raft. "I had a test done." "Shane," I said softly, my own tears finally falling. "The results came back a few days ago. Biologically, you're his." Shane pulled back, his face a mask of absolute devastation. "You're not my dad? Everything we did, the baseball games, the camping trips, was it all a lie?" I grabbed his shoulders and looked him dead in the eye. "Listen to me, Shane. Listen to me carefully. Biology is just a sequence of chemicals in a tube. It's genetics. It's hair color and height. That's all Douglas Kemp gave you. I gave you everything else. I taught you how to ride a bike. I sat by your bed every time you had the flu. I was the one who cheered the loudest when you got your varsity letter. I'm the one who loves you, Shane. Not him. He's just the man who slept with my wife. I am your father, and I will always be your father." Shane broke down then, sobbing into my chest. "I hate her, Dad. I hate her for what she did to us." "I know," I said, "but we're going to get through this together." That night, Shane stayed with me in the motel. We talked until the sun came up. He told me he wanted nothing to do with Douglas Kemp. He didn't care about his millions or his law firm. He wanted to keep my name. He wanted to stay with me. The next morning, the earn my return note came full circle. Nadine showed up at the motel. She looked like she'd aged 10 years. Her hair was unwashed, her makeup was smeared, and the arrogance was gone. "Dean, please," she begged in the hallway. "The police came to the house this morning. They're asking about the mortgage. They're talking about identity theft. You have to stop this for the family." "What family, Nadine?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. Shane stood right behind me, his arms crossed, his face a wall of stone. Nadine saw him and flinched. "Shane, baby, I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" Shane's voice was like a whip. "You used my dad. You used me. You let a man who didn't care about me father me from a distance, while my real dad worked himself to death for a lie. You're not my mother anymore. You're just a thief." Nadine collapsed against the hallway wall, sobbing. "Here's the deal, Nadine," I said, my voice cold and calculated. "You're going to sign over the house. You're going to sign a confession for the mortgage fraud that my lawyer will provide. You're going to waive any right to my business or my retirement. In exchange, I might ask the DA to show a little leniency on the fraud charges. But if you fight me, if you try to take one more dime from these kids, I will burn your world down," I said. "I will make sure Douglas Kemp's partners see every photo, every text, and every fraudulent document. I will make sure your name is synonymous with trash in this city." She looked up at me, searching for the boring, nice Dean she'd manipulated for 17 years. She didn't find him. She found a man who had finally settled the account. "I'll sign," she whispered. "Good," I said. "Now get out of here. You haven't earned a single second more of our time." I closed the door in her face. For the first time in years, the air in the room felt clean. The weight of the lie was finally off my shoulders. I looked at Shane, and he gave me a small, weary smile. "You did it, Dad." "We did it, son," I said. "Now, let's go find your sister. We have a new life to build." The divorce was finalized on a crisp October morning. Judge Harrison didn't hold back. Given the overwhelming evidence of 10 years of adultery, massive financial fraud, and parental deceit, he ruled entirely in my favor. I received the house in Columbus. I received primary custody of Haley and joint legal custody of Shane. Nadine was ordered to repay the stolen $180,000 second mortgage from her share of the liquidated marital assets, which effectively left her with nothing. But the real satisfaction came from the fallout for Douglas Kemp. My lawyer, Marcus, made sure the ethics board of the Ohio Bar Association received a very interesting package. While Douglas wasn't disbarred for the affair, the forged mortgage documents, which he had known about and benefited from, were a different story. His firm, terrified of a public scandal, forced him into a very quiet, very humiliating early retirement. His reputation as a premier corporate lawyer was in tatters. Last I heard, Nadine was living in a one-bedroom apartment on the far side of the city, working as a receptionist. Douglas Kemp dumped her the moment the legal heat got too high. Apparently, the thrill of the affair was only fun when someone else was paying for it. As for me, I had a massive glow-up. Without the constant, invisible stress of being hated in my own home, I felt 20 years younger. I started hitting the gym. I grew out the beard I'd always wanted. My firm, Pritchard and Associates, grew by 40% in a single year because I finally had the energy to focus on my own success. I started dating again about 6 months after the divorce. I met Rebecca through a mutual friend. She's a pediatric nurse, kind, funny, and incredibly grounded. She doesn't keep score. She doesn't talk about what people earn. She just loves. One evening, I was sitting on my back porch, the same porch I'd almost lost, watching the sunset with a glass of bourbon. Shane was home for the weekend from college. He was thriving in the engineering program at OSU. Haley was in the kitchen with Rebecca, laughing as they tried to bake a souffle. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Dean, I'm so sorry. I miss my son. I miss the life we had. Please talk to me." I didn't even feel a sting of anger. I didn't feel a rush of triumph. I felt nothing. I simply deleted the message and blocked the number. Some debts can never be repaid. Some foundations are too rotten to rebuild. I thought about that night in the kitchen. I thought about the 4 words I wrote on that notepad. Earn my return. I realized then that I didn't want her to earn anything. I didn't want to live in a world of transactions and debts anymore. I wanted the peace I had right now. I wanted the family that chose me every single day. I looked at Shane as he walked out onto the porch, sitting in the chair next to me. "You okay, Dad?" he asked. "Better than okay, son," I said, raising my glass to the fading light. The books are finally balanced. I'm Dean Pritchard. I lost a wife, but I found my son. I lost a lie, but I found the truth. And in the end, that is the best deal I ever made. She thought I was clueless. She thought I was weak. She didn't realize that an accountant always finds the missing money, and he always makes sure the debt is paid in full. I just smiled and took a sip of my drink. Life is good, and for once, I've earned every second of it.